Shabbat Shalom. So I have a quandary. I've got something that's been sort of niggling in the back of my head, scratching it, and I finally put my finger on the issue with Tzara'at that is bothering me the most. But don't worry, I've already got a solution, so let me walk you through the steps. So first of all, what is Tzara'at? You were not paying attention to the Torah reading. Well, maybe there was a particular illness that got mentioned in the English translation that you've seen before. Leprosy. But the thing is, it's not leprosy, right? And that's very confusing. It's confusing for a couple of reasons of, okay, you know, the English translators don't like leaving it as an untranslated word. Personally, I don't see the problem with that. If it's something that is unique to this particular setting, leave it untranslated. It's okay. The rest of us will get it. But there is a long-standing tradition of translating it as leprosy because leprosy does have some of the similar characteristics. There is some overlap of symptoms. But then, you know, there are overlap of symptoms of many different things in life. That doesn't mean we call them all by the same name. But there is actually a good reason for doing this overlap, and this is the one that I've struck upon. Because God didn't have to make Tzara'at share symptoms with any other ailment. I mean, we're talking about God here, and we're talking about Tzara'at, which is a spiritual ailment that manifests itself physically, and which is not subject to a physical treatment. It is only through a spiritual process that it goes away. So that means that this is entirely under God's control. No microorganisms involved, no virus, no bacteria, no fungus. This is entirely a spiritual action. Therefore, God could make it look like whatever God wanted. If God wanted Tzara'at to make you grow giant green butterfly wings, God could have done that. If God wanted Tzara'at to make you glow blue in the dark, God could have done that. He could have made it appear on your face with the glowing word Tzara'at, and then everybody would know that it was Tzara'at and there wouldn't be any issue. But God seemed to choose to make Tzara'at manifest in a way that was easily confused for other types of illnesses. So easily that we needed chapter after chapter after chapter to be able to give all the details of how to differentiate between Tzara'at and other types of incidents. And that was intended as a kindness. Follow the logic with me. What happens if Tzara'at is something like, let's say, a bright purple spotted rash on the inside of your arm whenever you're afflicted with Tzara'at? What is a person likely to do? Hide it, all right? Absolutely hide it, because as we all know, most of us are embarrassed by even our mundane physical ailments, which we'll get to in a minute, but our spiritual ailments, do we want to broadcast that to the world? Absolutely not. We would try to hide it. However, if Tzara'at nonetheless looks like a normal ailment, a regular kind of illness, one that perhaps there are other treatments for, then my instinct is not to hide it. My instinct is to decide whether it's something that can actually be treated. Because, you know, if I've got an illness that can be treated, I want treatment. So by making Tzara'at look like other types of illnesses in some ways, it makes it more likely that a person who is afflicted with it will go for treatment. But more importantly than that, it means that a person who goes for treatment will not be identified by the rest of the community as a person who is going to treatment for Tzara'at. Imagine if there was one door in the giant Kohen clinic that said, "Enter here if you have Tzara'at." Who wants to walk through that door? You know, you're announcing to everyone else around that you are going into that door because you think you have Tzara'at. And even if it turns out that you didn't, everyone who watched you go through that door, they don't know that. They think, oh, yeah, I see, Frank has Tzara'at. Yeah, well, you know, that's a spiritual ailment I hear. That must mean he's doing something that's angering God. I always thought Frank was kind of a shady fellow. We see what happens. Now, I know it's worth a good chuckle to put that up, but let me point out that we do similar things in our own world. Why do we have abortion clinics? Why don't people just go to the doctor for an abortion? You know, the same doctor that can take out your tonsils or do an appendectomy. Well, why can't it be in the same facility? Because there is a concerted effort to make sure that the regular, mundane, anonymous medical facilities will not provide that service, so that you must go to a clearly designated place where you can then be subjected to ridicule and scorn by those who wish to encourage you not to attend, to not seek treatment. The exact opposite of what Judaism is teaching in this case. Now, it's not only in the physical realm, although certainly we can think of other examples, but also in mental health. When I was growing up, nobody wanted anyone to find out if you had gone to therapy. Right? He saw a shrink. He went to a psychiatrist. This was something that could kill political campaigns. If people found out that you had gone to see a mental health professional, they would call you crazy behind your back, and they would say, he's off his rocker, he's not got it all together, this is not a person who we want to trust. And it could ruin a career, it could ruin lives because of the stigma attached. So people had to go, if they were willing to risk it at all, in secret to try and get any sort of mental health care. Thankfully, we've moved the needle a little bit on that, but not nearly enough. We are still resistant to get treatment for mental health issues. Likewise, how many people are just raring for the chance to walk through the door of a large addiction clinic, knowing that if they say to someone, oh yes, you know, my son, he's going for addiction treatment, that the family will come under that side-eye suspicion. Oh, I see, you must have done something wrong if your kid needs addiction treatment, as though this is something different than a mental health or physical health crisis. We still stigmatize the ill. And ironic as it may be, from a parashah where we have the ill crying out, tameh, tameh, which sounds like the ultimate stigmatization, nonetheless, the treatment of somebody with sara'at is exactly the opposite of stigmatizing them. Yes, there are ritual implications, which is why calling out that I am impure was important in order to maintain the purity of the ritual system. But the entire system was actually designed to make sure that as many people as possible would avail themselves of the insights of the Kohen to see whether this was something that would be cured with medicinal or spiritual treatment. It was trying to blend the two groups together so that no one would be able to identify this one as a sara'at person and this one as someone who just has an unfortunate skin condition, which back in the ancient world, everyone had an unfortunate skin condition. This is pre-modern hygiene after all. Now, if you've followed me so far, there might still be one question that is scratching at your head. Well, probably more than one, but one that I want to talk about, which is, okay, fine. Maybe you've bought into me, my ideas. You're saying, Rabbi, you're right. If somebody has a mental health issue, they should not be stigmatized for this. We should find a way for them to seek help without being subject to public ridicule, and likewise for any of the different health issues that a person might undergo. But sara'at, Rabbi, really? Sara'at? You began, you accuse me, of telling us that sara'at is a spiritual ailment, that it is something that is brought about because of a spiritual fault in the individual. And the rabbis go through great pains to outline the various versions of personal offenses that have been committed that might yield sara'at. That perhaps you have been gossiping about other people, you have been practicing in lashon hara, and you have been slandering them and degrading your neighbors throughout the community. Perhaps you have been stingy, unwilling to loan and give to those in need, or even just those that were looking for help. Your neighbor who wanted to have a sieve, and you said, oh, I don't have one. And so don't worry, sara'at will force you to empty the contents of your house so we can all see that you were a miser and liar to your community. Rabbi, do we really think that God was orchestrating sara'at in such a way that he cared about these people? That he wanted to protect them and wanted them to not be open to ridicule? Well, yes and no. Clearly, there are certain treatments for tzara'at, like the disclosing of the contents of a house in order to expose the lack of tzedakah that a person would be doing, that were intended to be a kick in the tuchus that would shake that person out of their complacency and force them to have tshuva in a more abrupt manner. But generally speaking, the treatment for personal tzara'at was a period of isolation, of reflection, a chance to actually think, to ruminate upon what it is that you have done that has brought you to that point. And by encouraging more people to go, by making tzara'at not publicly stigmatized in order that more people will walk through the tent flap of the Kohen and ask for help, it means that more people will be then steered towards those moments of reflection in which they can do teshuvah, in which means they will overcome whatever spiritual shortcoming has led them to that point. The alternative, of course, would be to tell them, you've messed up, God is angry at you, just hold on until you get smote. That would be the only other alternative. Right? If God had wanted to smite these people, if God had wanted them to be struck down and suffered forever, why would he have provided a ritual for them to go to the Kohen, to have a period of reflection, and to have a course back into the community? Once stricken, you should be stricken from the roles of the community. This is a bad person. They have been struck by God's blight. And even if the blight clears up, who would ever want them back in their community, having shown that they are the kind of person who makes a mistake? You mean they're human. Now, their mistakes may have been slightly more egregious than maybe the average mistake, as not everybody was subjected to tzara'at. But nonetheless, God seems to think that they should be encouraged to do teshuvah. They should be encouraged to reflect upon their mistake, and they should find a way to come back into the community, and the community should then accept them. I know, it's surprising. We're living in a society, thankfully our community is a little different, but living in a society where personalities and relationships are disposable, it may come as a shock that one of the primary priorities of this whole section of Torah is to find a way to take somebody who has made a mistake and bring them back into the community without the mistake as part of their personality anymore. Rather than simply cutting them out, excising them, as though you were removing a tumor, banishing them into the wilderness, the idea is, right now you need a timeout. You need to figure out what's going on, and once you have figured that out, we will help normalize you back into the community. That our goal is not to cut you out, our goal is to help you heal. Now, we can't do that entirely on our own. You've got to be the main person participating in that, which is why Judaism does not just have a wave your hand and everything will be okay, which was exemplified in the Haftarah that Judy chanted, that Naaman was just expecting a hand wave and healing because that's how the pagan priest did it. And instead he learned he had to overcome his own arrogance in order to be able to be cured. Likewise, the people who suffer tzara'at do need to go through a hard period of self-evaluation. But that self-evaluation is designed to lead them back into our community. And we are there to accept them when they have returned. It is all woven together, as we said, the warp and woof, to tie ourselves together, to not simply cut out this piece of our community, to not really remove it and consign it to the fire as we would a piece of cloth, but to take people and say, no. Maybe stones cannot be saved. Maybe the cloth cannot be saved. But every person can. There is a way for them to come back. And it begins by not stigmatizing their condition in the first place. It continues by making sure that because it's not stigmatized, they can and will seek help and treatment. And then it concludes by providing a path for them to come back into the community as a welcome and loved member of that community. That's not easy for them, and it's not easy for us. But the alternative is to continue to circle our wagons tighter and tighter as we spin off those who fall from grace, those who are no longer in the good standing of the community. denying them any route for return, denying them any incentive to change. The Torah was not designed like that. The Torah told us each human is irreplaceable, and we must do what we can to help them, even those that are most damaged among us, to heal and take their place at our side once again. Shabbat Shalom.